It has already happened. Two children were placed in the same wound, and the wound chose them differently. You have seen this in your own family, or in the family next to yours, or in the family you tried to leave behind. One child became the one who hurts, the other became the one who absorbs. You recognize this. The division was not a decision either of them made. There is a habit in popular psychology of treating the narcissist and the empath as if they came from different countries, as if one were a predator and the other prey, as if their meeting were accidental, two opposite souls colliding by misfortune. This is wrong. This was never what the unconscious was doing. The narcissist and the empath, when they emerge from the same household, are not opposite. They are the two halves of a single survival. I want to say this carefully, because the recognition is severe. The child who becomes the narcissist and the child who becomes the empath are responding to the same impossible parent, the same withheld love, the same conditional gaze, the same atmosphere of emotional unavailability or punishment or grandiosity. What divides them is not the wound. What divides them is the role that was still available when they arrived. Birth order matters here, though not in the way birth order books suggest. What matters is which psychological position was already occupied when the second child entered the family. If the first child has already learned that survival requires hardening that to feel the parent's coldness is to be destroyed by it, then the second child cannot also harden. The role is taken. The family system is a closed economy of psychic positions. There is no room for two armored children, so the second child develops the opposite strategy. Where the first child cut off feeling to survive, the second child amplifies feeling, becomes the family's emotional radar, becomes the one who reads the parent's mood before the parent has named it. Or it goes the other way. The first child is the sensitive one, the one who absorbs, the one who tries to repair the parent's sadness with their own attention. And the second child, watching the first child be consumed by this role, learns something different. The second child sees that absorption is annihilation. The second child develops the opposite armor, hardness, grandiosity, the refusal to feel what the parent feels, the refusal to be used as the parent's emotional mirror. This is the first thing I want to name. The roles are reactive, not innate. The empath did not arrive empathic. The narcissist did not arrive narcissistic. Both were children who looked at the same parent and made opposite calculations about how to survive being seen by that parent. There is more here, but I will return to it. What Jung understood and what most contemporary writing on narcissism misses is that any family with a wounded parent produces a compensatory structure in the children. The unconscious of the family system distributes the unbearable material across its members. One child carries the rage the parent could not feel. Another child carries the grief. Another carries the shame. The children are not separate psyches. They are nodes in a single unconscious field, each assigned a portion of what the parent could not metabolize. In the case of the narcissist-empath split, the parent's unbearable material was usually two things at once: There was a refusal of vulnerability. The parent could not be soft, could not admit need, could not show the wound underneath, and there was a hunger for mirroring. The parent needed the children to reflect back the version of themselves they could not be on their own. These two demands are contradictory. No child can satisfy both, so the children split the labor. One child specializes in not feeling, becomes the hard surface the parent can project grandeur onto, becomes the inheritor of the parent's denied vulnerability. The other child specializes in feeling, becomes the soft surface that absorbs the parent's overflow, becomes the inheritor of the parent's denied need. The narcissist child is carrying the parent's repression. The empath child is carrying the parent's overflow. They are not opposites. They are the two ends of a single emotional debt the parent could not pay. I knew a woman who, for years, returned to the same dream. She was standing in the kitchen of her childhood home. The kitchen was lit with the particular yellow light of late afternoon. For the light she remembered from being 7 or 8 years old. There was a long wooden table in the center of the room. On one side of the table sat her older brother, eating quietly. On the other side sat herself, also eating. Between them, in the exact center of the table, was a third plate, empty, no chair, no person, just the plate, gleaming. In the dream she understood, without being told, that the plate belonged to her mother, and that her mother would never sit there, and that she and her brother had been eating around this absence for their entire lives, each developing a different way of pretending not to see it. That dream is the structure: two children eating around an empty plate, each child finding a different strategy for not naming the absence. The brother who became, in waking life, the cold one, the achiever, the man who married 3 times and never let any wife close, had learned to look away from the plate entirely. He ate as if the plate were not there. He performed his hunger as appetite, ambition, as a demand to be served. The woman who became, in waking life, the one who could not say no, the one who could not leave the bad marriage, the one who counseled friends through their breakdowns while her own life dissolved, had learned to fill the plate herself. She brought food to it. She wiped it clean. She kept it warm. She was the keeper of the absence, the one who tended what was missing, the one who carried the family's grief by becoming its caretaker. Neither of them named the mother. The mother had been emotionally absent since their early childhood, present in body, absent in mirroring, and neither sibling, even into their 40s, could say this out loud to the other. The brother had built a life that required the absence to remain unnamed. The sister had built a life that required the absence to be perpetually tended. To name the mother would have collapsed both of their structures. This is the part of the empath-narcissist dynamic that the surface literature cannot reach. They are not strangers who collided in adulthood. They are siblings, often literal siblings, or psychologically siblings, children of the same emotional household, divided into complementary strategies, locked together by their shared inability to name what was missing when the empath meets the narcissist in adult life, in romance, in friendship, in workplace dynamics. The unconscious recognizes the family system instantly. The empath feels, I know how to be near this kind of person. The narcissist feels, I know how to be received by this kind of person. The recognition is not chemistry. It is the resumption of an old assignment, what you are inside. If you have lived this, is not the failure of judgment. You did not pick the wrong partner because you were broken. You picked the partner whose unconscious matched the unconscious you were trained to receive. The empath is recruited into narcissistic relationships not because she is naive. She is recruited because her psychic structure was built from childhood to make narcissistic structure feel like home. And the narcissist, and I will say this even though it is unpopular, is not selecting the empath out of malice. The narcissist is selecting the only kind of person whose presence does not threaten to expose the absence the narcissist has spent their whole life refusing to feel. The empath fills the empty plate. The narcissist can keep eating without ever looking at it. This is what I want you to hold with me. Before we go further, the two children of the same wound are not enemies. They are co-survivors of a parent neither of them could afford to mourn. The empath did not lose to the narcissist. The narcissist did not win against the empath. They were both losing in different directions to the same original silence. What separates them now in adulthood is which one is willing to look at the empty plate. The narcissist cannot. To name the absence would dissolve the structure that has held the narcissist's life together. The empath can. The empath has been looking at the plate her whole life. She knew it was empty before she had words for it. She just did not know that the looking itself was the inheritance, that the act of seeing the absence, of tending it, of trying to fill it, was the role she was assigned. The moment her brother chose differently, there is something else here, and I want to name it because most accounts of this dynamic stop too soon. The empath in the family system was often the one the parent secretly preferred, not loved more. The parent could not love more, but the parent used her more. The parent leaned on her. The parent told her things the parent did not tell the older child. The parent confided, complained, wept in her presence. This is what is called, in the analytic literature, parentification. And the empath child, in receiving this leaning, mistook it for intimacy. She believed she was loved because she was needed. The narcissist child, watching this from the other side of the table, learned a different lesson. He saw that intimacy was extraction. He saw that to be needed was to be drained. He developed the opposite strategy. He would not be needed. He would be admired. He would require attention without giving access. So they grew up. One learned that love means being used. The other learned that love means being adored. And when they meet in marriages, in workplaces, in the long entanglements that define so many adult lives, they are not meeting as strangers. They are meeting as the two children at that table. still eating around the empty plate, still unable to name the mother who was never coming back. The dream changes shape over the years, but the table remains. I want to stay with this image because it carries the whole architecture of what we are describing, and because the people who have lived this dynamic recognize the table before they recognize the theory. In the family of origin, the table is literal. There is a kitchen or a dining room or a corner of a small apartment where the family ate, and the geography of that room recorded the emotional positions: who sat near the parent, who sat opposite, who got up first, who stayed after the meal. The empath child, in most of these families, was the one who stayed. She helped clear. She listened to the parent's exhaustion or anger or sorrow while the dishes were being washed. The narcissist child left the table quickly, went to his room, closed the door. He had already understood that staying was dangerous, that to remain near the parent was to be consumed by the parent's unmetabolized affect. He developed his armor in the bedroom with the closed door. She developed her permeability at the sink. This is not metaphor. This is the actual mechanism by which the split occurred, hour by hour, evening by evening. The two children practiced opposite responses to the same stimulus, and the practice hardened into structure. By the time they were 10 years old, the assignment was complete. The empath could know Ngn, not absorb. The narcissist could no longer not armor. The capacity for the opposite response had atrophied in each of them. They had become, in a real and biological sense, specialists in different halves of the human emotional repertoire. What this produces in adulthood is not two different kinds of people. It produces two different kinds of incompleteness. The empath has access to the full range of feeling, but no access to refusal. She can grieve. She can absorb another's pain. She can sit with sorrow for hours, but she cannot say no without enormous psychic cost. The narcissist has access to the full range of self-assertion, but no access to absorption. He can demand, he can perform, he can dominate a room, but he cannot let another person's feeling enter his body without it triggering panic. Each is missing the half the other developed. This is why, when they meet, the recognition is so complete. Each unconsciously senses in the other the missing half of themselves, and this is the trap, because the recognition feels like love. It feels like the famous descriptions of finding one's missing piece, one's other half, one's twin flame. The literature on twin flames, on soulmate dynamics, on instant chemistry, much of this literature is describing, without knowing it, the meeting of two complementary survival structures from similar childhoods. The intensity is not destiny. The intensity is the unconscious recognizing its old assignment and reaching for it again. Jung wrote in his work on the syzygy that the masculine and feminine within the psyche seek each other through projection, that we encounter our missing half externally before we can integrate it internally. This was his frame for the anima and animus, the contrasexual archetypes. What I am describing here is structurally similar but specific to a particular family wound. The empath and the narcissist are not seeking the contrasexual archetype. They are seeking the half of themselves that was amputated by the family's distribution of labor. The empath is seeking the capacity to refuse, which he lost. The narcissist is seeking the capacity to absorb, which he lost. They cannot get these capacities from each other. The capacities can only be regrown internally through years of slow reintegration, but the unconscious does not know this. The unconscious tries to retrieve the missing half through the other person, and the relationship becomes the stage on which the old amputation is endlessly reperformed. There is a particular cruelty in this, and I want to name it without softening. The empath, in entering the relationship with the narcissist, is unconsciously hoping that this time the parent will see her. The narcissist is unconsciously hoping that this time he will not have to feel. Both hopes are doomed. The empath cannot make the narcissist see her, because the narcissist's psychic structure depends on not seeing. The narcissist cannot get the empath to stop feeling for him, because the empath's psychic structure depends on absorbing what others cannot hold. So the relationship becomes the slow, patient enactment of the original family failure, with the parent absent and the two children now performing the roles for each other. She tends his empty plate. He eats without looking at it. The empty plate is still the mother. The empty plate has always been the mother. I want to turn now to something more interior. I want to describe what it actually feels like from the inside to be the empath child. As she becomes the empath adult, there is a particular sensation in the body of the empath that I do not see described in the literature, but that nearly every empath I have spoken with recognizes immediately. It is a sense of being slightly ahead of the other person's emotion, not telepathy, not magic, something more like a tightening in the chest or the stomach, a half second before the other person's mood shifts. The empath learned in childhood to read the parent's micro-expressions, the small changes in breath and posture and voice that preceded the parent's anger or withdrawal or collapse. She learned this because the cost of missing the signal was unbearable. If she missed the signal, she missed her chance to soften the parent, to redirect the parent, to absorb the parent before the parent's affect spilled onto everyone. So she developed a permanent low-grade scanning. She became an instrument tuned to other people's pre-emotional states, and the instrument cannot be turned off. It is still scanning. In middle age, in every conversation, in every room she enters. This scanning is exhausting. It is also, in a particular way, addictive, because the scanning produces a feeling of agency. The empath feels accurately that she can influence the emotional weather of the room. She feels that her attention, her presence, her careful attunement changes what happens, and in childhood, this was often true. Her attunement to the parent did sometimes work, did sometimes prevent the explosion, did sometimes get her a moment of warmth, So the scanning was reinforced, it worked, it produced results, and in adulthood, she continues to use it, continues to believe that if she just attunes carefully enough, the other person will soften, will return, will see her. What she cannot see from inside the scanning is that the scanning is itself the prison. As long as she is scanning, she is not living her own life. She is living adjacent to other people's lives, perpetually adjusting her own state to influence theirs. This is what Jung called participation mystique, the unconscious identification with another psyche, the loss of the boundary between her interior and theirs. The empath lives by default in participation mystique. The narcissist, by opposite default, lives in defended isolation. Neither is in their own life. Both are in flight from the original, unbearable parent. In opposite direction, the narcissist child became the narcissist adult through a different interior process. And I want to describe this too, because most accounts of narcissism describe it from the outside, as a set of behaviors, rather than from the inside, as a felt experience. The narcissist's interior is not what people imagine. It is not grandiosity humming pleasantly through the day. It is, more often, a kind of high-frequency tension, a vigilance against any incoming material that could threaten the constructed self, a scanning, too, but a different kind of scanning. The empath scans for the other's mood. The narcissist scans for threats to his image. Both are scanning. Both are exhausted. Both are unable to rest in the ordinary moment. The narcissist child learned that to feel the parent's emotion was to be erased by it. So he developed a wall. The wall is not malice. The wall is survival. As an adult, the wall is still up, but it has been rebuilt in more sophisticated form. It now looks like confidence, like ambition, like the refusal to be small. It looks to outsiders like strength, but inside the wall, the man is the same boy who closed the bedroom door at age 6 because he could not bear to sit at the table any longer. He has not grown past that boy. He has only built a more elaborate door. When the narcissist meets the empath, the door cracks open. He feels something he is not used to feeling. Her attunement reaches through the wall. He is briefly, in the early stage of the relationship, touched. This is the famous early intensity that empaths describe, the sense that the narcissist, despite his coldness elsewhere, was vulnerable with her, opened to her, showed her parts of himself no one else got to see. This is real. It happens. The narcissist's wall is not impermeable. It is just very rarely permeable. And the empath's particular gift, her trained capacity to read what the other has not said, gets through. For a moment, the narcissist feels what he has not allowed himself to feel since childhood. And then the panic comes, because to feel is, in his psychic system, to be annihilated. The opened wall is intolerable. He must close it, and the closing is brutal. because the opening was sudden and unwilled, and the panic of closing is proportionate to how much was felt, so he withdraws, he devalues, he becomes cruel. The empath, who has just had her deepest attunement received for the first time in her life, cannot understand what happened. She believes she did something wrong. She did nothing wrong. She succeeded too well. She reached a part of him that he cannot afford to let anyone reach. And he is now in flight from her precisely because she got in. This is the cycle. He opens, he panics, he punishes her for opening him. She blames herself, she tries to repair, he opens again, he panics again, he punishes again. The cycle is not a relationship. It is the original childhood wound being acted out, with her cast as the parent he could not feel, and him cast as the parent she could not reach. There is a way out of this, but the way out is not what either of them imagines. Neither of them can save the other. Neither of them can complete the other. The completion they are seeking can only come through the slow internal recovery of the half each amputated in childhood. The empath must regrow the capacity to refuse, to harden when needed, to say no without dying. The narcissist must regrow the capacity to absorb, to feel another's feeling without being annihilated by it. These are not skills the other person can teach. These are interior reconstructions that take years and that cannot be done while the original assignment is still being performed. Most empaths leave the relationship before doing this work. Most narcissists never do this work at all. The empath, when she leaves, often does not understand what she has been doing for years. She thinks she was in love, she was in reenactment, she was attempting to complete with the narcissist the unfinished business with the parent. She was trying to get from him the seeing she never got from the parent. The leaving is the beginning of the recognition. The recognition is the beginning of the integration, and the integration is the slow process by which she stops being the empath of the family system and becomes a whole person, with both halves of the emotional repertoire restored. This is where Jung's framework opens into something the popular literature does not name. The empath, after she leaves, must do something that feels initially like betrayal. She must develop the very capacity she was assigned to lack. She must become, in measured doses, the thing she was trained to fear. She must learn to refuse, to say no, to withdraw care, to leave a person in their own emotion without rescuing them. This is, for here, the integration of what looks like her shadow. She has projected coldness, refusal, hardness onto the narcissist for years. She must now reclaim those qualities as her own undeveloped capacities. They are not evil. They are simply the half of herself the family system did not let her develop. To become whole, she must take them back from him. And the narcissist, if he ever begins the work, and most do not, this must be said honestly, must do the same in reverse. He must reclaim the capacity to feel, to absorb, to let the other's emotion enter his body without flight. He has projected weakness, neediness, emotional excess onto the empath for years, he must now reclaim those qualities as his own undeveloped capacities. He will not do this easily. He may not do it at all, but if he does, it will look from outside like he is becoming the empath, and the empath doing her work will look like she is becoming the narcissist. They are not switching positions. They are both becoming whole. The half people are integrating into full people, and the integration looks from the outside like the other half coming online. This is what the original wound was preventing. The wound divided one whole human capacity across two children. The healing is not reunion with the other child. The healing is the internal reunion with the amputated half. The empath does not need the narcissist to become whole. The narcissist does not need the empath to become whole. Ish, alone, doing the slow internal work, can recover what the family system distributed, but this is rarely what happens. What usually happens is that the empath leaves, grieves, and eventually finds another narcissist or another partner who is structurally similar enough that the same dynamic resumes. She does this not because she's broken. She does this because the original assignment is still active in her unconscious until she does the work of integrating her own refusal, of recovering her own hardness, of bringing her own shadow back into herself. She will continue to externalize that material onto whoever is available. The next partner will carry her amputated half, and she will continue to scan, to attune, to absorb, to caretake the empty plate. There is a moment in this process, and I want to mark it carefully because it is the threshold when the empath realizes that her absorption is not love, that her endless availability is not love, that what she has called love her entire life was, in fact, the family role she was assigned at age 4. This recognition is devastating because it dissolves the identity she has built around her own goodness, her own depth, her own gift. She has thought of herself as the loving one, the sensitive one, the one who feels more than others. And the recognition is that all of this was true and also was the prison. She was loving, she was sensitive, she did feel more than others. And all of it was a survival strategy that became a character. What follows that recognition is not relief. It is a strange, suspended grief that has no name in the popular literature on healing. The empath, having seen that her sensitivity was an assignment rather than an identity, does not know who she is underneath it. She has been the empath for so long that the empath was the only self she had access to. Without the scanning, without the attunement, without the constant calibration to other people's affect, there is silence inside her, and the silence is not peaceful. The silence is, at first, terrifying. This is the interior of the dissolution, and I want to describe it accurately, because most accounts skip past it. They go from recognition to wholeness in a few sentences. The actual psychic event takes years and includes a long passage where the woman does not know if she is healing or losing her mind. She has stopped absorbing other people's emotions but she has not yet developed her own emotional center. She has stopped saying yes automatically, but she has not yet learned the texture of her own yes. She has stopped tending the empty plate, but she does not yet know what to put on her own plate. There is a hollow in the center of the days. The hollow is not depression. The hollow is the space where the family role used to live, and the new self has not yet arrived to occupy it. This is one of the reasons many empaths return to the dynamic. They return not because they were wrong to leave, but because the hollow is so disorienting that the old role, even in its pain, feels like home. The narcissist or the narcissist-shaped partner calls, he apologizes, or he does not apologize but reappears, and she feels suddenly the old activation. The scanning resumes, the attunement resumes, the hollow fills. She mistakes the filling for love. She mistakes the activation for aliveness, and she goes back because the old role is, in its terrible way, more bearable than the silence that follows it. What she does not yet know is that the silence is the new self forming. Slowly, beneath the discomfort, beneath the disorientation, beneath the urge to return to the assignment, something is being constituted, a different kind of attention, an attention that turns inward, not outward, an attention that registers her own state before it registers others. This is, in Jung's terms, the beginning of the withdrawal of projection. She is taking back from other people the emotional labor she had outsourced to them. She is asking, for the first time in her adult life, what she feels rather than what they need her to feel. And this question is almost unanswerable at first. She has lost the muscle of self-reference, the muscle of asking in the middle of any moment, what is happening inside me? She has been asking what is happening inside everyone else for so long that her own interior has become a foreign country. She walks through it cautiously, not recognizing the landmarks. She does not know what she likes. She does not know what she wants. She does not know what she feels, except as it relates to what others are feeling. The recovery of an unconditioned interior is the slow work of years. I want to name something here that the literature on narcissistic abuse often misses. The empath is not, in this process, becoming less compassionate. She is not, by reclaiming her refusal, becoming cold. The polarity in which compassion equals self-erasure and self-honoring equals coldness is itself part of the wound. It is the parent's framework, internalized. The parent who demanded total availability called it love, and called any refusal cruelty. The empath has lived inside that frame her whole life. To break it, she must do something that initially feels cruel and is not. She must let other people have their feelings without absorbing them. She must let other people make decisions without protecting them from consequences. She must let other people fail, suffer, in struggle, without rushing to repair. And the first time she does this, she will feel like a monster. The feeling of being a monster is the family system protesting its own dissolution. The system is encoded in her body, and the body, when she refuses the old role, will register the refusal as a betrayal. This is the somatic price of integration. It does not mean she is doing it wrong. It means she is doing it for the first time. What replaces the old compassion slowly is a different kind of care, a care that has a perimeter, a care that comes from choice rather than compulsion, a care that can be offered or withheld, and that, when offered, is not a performance of goodness, but a real presence. The empath, when she has integrated her shadow, becomes capable of love in a way she never was before, because what she called love was, in fact, automatic absorption, and automatic absorption is not love. It is unconscious recruitment into another person's emotional system. Real love requires the capacity to remain distinct. The empath could not, before, remain distinct. She could only merge. After the integration, she can choose merging when it is appropriate and refuse it when it is not. This is what Jung meant when he wrote that love which is not also free is not love. The empath, before integration, was not free. She is becoming free now, and the freedom is making her capable of love for the first time. I knew a woman who, in the 3rd year after leaving a long marriage to a narcissistic husband, dreamed the following dream. She was walking through a forest at twilight. The forest was familiar to her, though she could not place it. She came to a clearing, and in the clearing stood her younger self, perhaps 4 or 5 years old. The child was holding a small wooden box in her hands. The child looked up at her and held out the box. Inside the box was a knife, a simple kitchen knife with a wooden handle. The child said nothing. The woman understood in the dream that she was being given the knife back, that the knife had been hers in childhood and had been taken from her, that she had spent her entire adult life unarmed because the knife had been taken. She took the knife from the box. She did not use it. She did not need to use it. She simply held it, and the child smiled and walked back into the trees. The woman woke up and wept for an hour because she understood, without translation, without theory, that she had just been given back the capacity to refuse. That dream is the integration moment, and it is worth naming what was in it and what was not. The knife was not for the husband. The knife was not for any specific person. The knife was the symbol of refusal itself. The capacity to draw a line, the capacity to defend a boundary. This capacity had been amputated in childhood. The dream returned it, and the dream returned it through the child's hands, which is to say, through the very part of herself that had been forced to give it up. The integration is not the adult acquiring something new. The integration is the adult receiving back what the child was made to surrender. The knife was always hers. The family system had only required her to forget she was carrying it. Now I want to turn the lens once more, because there is a question that hovers over everything I have said so far, and the question deserves to be named directly. What about the narcissist? Is he also capable of this integration? Is there hope for him? The literature on narcissistic abuse, especially in its popular online forms, often answers this question with a flat no. The narcissist does not change. The narcissist cannot change. Leave and do not look back. I understand why this framing exists, and I understand the protective function it serves. People who have been damaged by narcissistic partners need to be told clearly that waiting for the narcissist to change is itself a form of the old role. The empath who waits is still tending the empty plate, but the truth, as a matter of psychological structure, is more complicated than the popular framing allows. The narcissist is not, in Jung's terms, a different kind of human. He is a person who, in childhood, made a different but equally legitimate calculation about how to survive an unbearable parent. His armor is more visible than the empath's permeability, but the armor and the permeability are the same kind of thing, survival adaptations that became character. The narcissist can, in principle, do the work the empath does. He can recover the capacity to feel. He can let in the affect he has been deflecting his whole life. He can grieve the parent who could not love him. He can reclaim from the empath he projected onto the capacity to absorb. This is possible. It is rare, but it is possible. What is required is something the narcissist almost never has access to, which is a moment of collapse so complete that the armor cannot be reinstated. Some narcissists experience this through a major loss, the death of a parent, the loss of a career, a catastrophic illness, the departure of the empath partner who finally leaves and does not return. When the collapse is total, the wall cracks, and the effect the narcissist has spent decades not feeling enters all at once. This is, in alchemical terms, his nigredo, his own dissolution. The collapse is what his system was built to prevent, and so when it comes, it is devastating, but it is also, paradoxically, the only condition under which his integration becomes possible. The armor must fail. The constructed self must dissolve. He must, for the first time, to feel what he has refused to feel his entire life. And if he can stay inside the collapse rather than rebuilding the armor, if he can let the affect pass through him without immediately constructing a new defense, then the integration becomes available to him too. Most narcissists, when they collapse, rebuild. They find a new admirer. They construct a new identity. They restore the wall. This is what makes the prognosis so guarded, not because they are incapable, but because the conditions of integration are conditions they have spent their lives preventing. The empath, by contrast, has been living inside the affect her entire life. Her integration requires the development of the armor she lacks. The narcissist's integration requires the dissolution of the armor he has built. The empath has to add, the narcissist has to subtract, and subtraction in the human psyche is much harder than addition. I am saying this because I want to honor the difficulty of the narcissist's position without sentimentalizing it. The empath, in living, sometimes carries a residue of moral superiority that is itself a defense. She believes the narcissist was simply bad, that she was good, that the relationship was the meeting of two moral categories. This framing, while protective in the short term, prevents the deeper recognition the narcissist was not bad. The narcissist was the other survival strategy he chose at age 5 or 6. What she did not choose, and the cost of his choice was the loss of access to feeling. She lost the capacity to refuse. He lost the capacity to feel. These are not moral positions. They are psychic injuries with opposite topographies. The deeper recognition, and this is the one that most fully releases the empath from the dynamic, is that the narcissist was as wounded as she was, that his cruelty was not strength but the panic of an opened wall, that his coldness was not character but the rigidity of a defense he could not afford to lose. This recognition is not forgiveness, it is not reconciliation, it is simply seeing, and the seeing, paradoxically, is what allows her to leave him in a way that finally completes the leaving, because as long as he is in her interior, a monster, he retains a kind of psychic charge. He is still there. The monster is still in the room. When she sees him, truly, as the wounded child who chose armor over feeling, when she sees that he is, in fact, the other half of her own original wound, then he begins to lose his power over her. He becomes, in her psyche, simply a person who could not do the work, a person whose survival strategy locked him out of the integration she chose, not a villain, not a savior, just a man who became unable to feel because he had to. This is the second integration. The first is the recovery of her own amputated capacities. The second is the withdrawal of her projections from him. As long as she sees him as monstrous, she is still in participation, mystique with him, still defined by him, still in relation to him, still measuring her own emerging self against his absence. When she sees him as wounded, the projection withdraws and he becomes, finally, separate from her, not because she has stopped caring, but because the unconscious recruitment is over. There is a long passage in Jung's later work where he wrote about the moral problem at the heart of individuation. He wrote that the integration of the shadow requires a kind of ethical seriousness that most people are not willing to undertake, because the integration requires seeing oneself as containing the very qualities one has condemned in others. The empath, in this process, must see that she contains the capacity for refusal that she condemned in the narcissist. She must see that she contains the capacity for self-protection, for prioritizing herself, for being, in measured doses, the one who does not give. She must see that her endless giving was not virtue. It was avoidance of the harder act of being a separate person with her own claims. This is what is most difficult to face. The empath's giving was in part, a way of not having a self. As long as she was attuned to others, she did not have to develop her own interior. As long as she was responding to others' needs, she did not have to know her own needs. The giving was beneath the surface, a sophisticated form of self-evasion. To recover from it, she must stop evading. She must become a self that can make claims, ask for things, refuse things, choose, prefer, and prioritize. This is the work that no one prepared her for, because the family system rewarded her for not doing it. The family system needed her to remain selfless. The recovery requires becoming a self. What is being named here is the architecture of what you have been living, not as accusation, not as diagnosis, not as the moralism of healing culture, simply as recognition. The two children at the table did what they had to do. The plate was empty. The mother was not coming back. They divided the unbearable between them in the only way that was available, and they have spent their adult lives inside that division. To see this clearly is not to be free of it, but it is the beginning of being able to leave the table at last, to stand up, to turn around, to walk out of the room that has held you both since you were children, and to find, slowly, the room that is yours, and that has no plate in the center, and that has only the silence that was always there underneath, and that is, finally, your own. The room that is finally yours does not look the way you imagined it would. This is the first thing I need to name, because the popular literature on healing promises a destination that does not arrive in the form it was promised. You imagined, perhaps, a peaceful room, a room with light, a room in which you would feel, at last, at home. What you actually arrive in is a room you do not recognize. The furniture is sparse, the walls are unfamiliar, the light, when it comes, is not the warm light of belonging, but a clearer, colder light, the light by which things can be seen exactly as they are. This light is harder to live in than the dim familiarity of the old kitchen. It takes time to adjust. The empath who has done this work, who has left the dynamic, who has recovered the knife, who has withdrawn the projection, who has seen the narcissist as the other wounded child rather than the monster, finds herself often in a strange position in middle life. She is more clear-seeing than she has ever been. She is also lonelier than she has ever been. The two are connected. The clarity itself is what produces the loneliness, because she now sees in many of the relationships of her earlier life the structure she could not see before. She sees that this friend was a soft narcissist. She sees that this colleague used her as the empath of the office. She sees that this family member has been performing the parental role she once filled. The seeing does not destroy the relationships, but it changes them. She can no longer be the empath of these systems, and the systems, accustomed to her in that role, do not always accommodate the change. Some relationships end, some adjust, some become smaller, less central, less load-bearing. The friend who needed her constant attunement drifts. The sister who relied on her to manage the family's emotional weather stops calling. The colleague who used her as the office confidant is offended that she is no longer available. She loses people, and the losing is not failure. It is the natural sorting that happens when a person stops performing the role that organized their relationships. Some people loved her. Some people loved the role. The ones who loved the role cannot stay once the role is gone. The ones who loved her remain, often surprised by who she is becoming, sometimes more interested in her than they were before, sometimes less, but the relationships are now real. They are between two distinct people, and this kind of relationship, while less intense than the merged kind, is the only kind that does not require the perpetual amputation of one of the participants. There is something else that emerges in this room, and I want to describe it carefully because it is rarely named. The empath, having recovered her capacity to refuse, often discovers that she has access to a kind of authority she did not know she possessed. Not the loud authority of dominance, a quiet authority, the authority of a person who knows what she will and will not do, and who does not require external permission to know this. This authority is what was missing throughout her life. She had warmth, she had depth, she had attunement. She did not have authority, because authority requires a stable interior from which decisions can be made, and her interior had been outsourced to the family, to the partner, to whoever needed her at any given moment. Now, with the interior reclaimed, the authority forms, and the authority, when it appears, is unmistakable. People around her sense it, they adjust to it, some respect it, some resent it. The ones who resent it are often the ones who relied on her not having it. I want to turn to the parent now, because everything we have been describing returns, finally, to the parent. The empath and the narcissist were both responses to a parent. The healing of both requires, at some point, a reckoning with that parent, and the reckoning is not what the healing culture often suggests. It is not necessarily confrontation, it is not necessarily reconciliation, it is something more interior. It is the act of finally seeing the parent as a separate person, with their own wound, their own history, their own incapacity, rather than as the figure who was supposed to love you and failed. This is what Jung meant when he wrote about the withdrawal of the parental imago. The parental imago is the unconscious image of the parent that the child carries forward into adult life. The imago is not the actual parent. The imago is a fusion of the actual parent, the child's needs, the family system, and the wound. The child carries the imago, often for decades after the actual parent is gone. The imago is what the empath has been trying to satisfy, to repair, to win over. In every adult relationship, the narcissist has been trying to defeat the same imago, to dominate it, to prove that he does not need it. Both are still in relation to the imago. The actual parent may be dead, my bestsenile may be a continent away. The imago is still in the room. To withdraw the imago is to see the actual parent, to see the small, frightened person they actually were, to see the wound they carried and could not name, to see that they did not have, at the time they were raising you, the resources to give you what you needed. This seeing is not exoneration. It does not mean what they did was acceptable. The harm was real. The deprivation was real. The empty plate was real. But the parent who set the empty plate was themselves a person who had once been a child at someone else's empty plate. The wound did not begin with them. The wound did not begin with their parents either. The wound runs back through generations, and at some point in the chain, an actual original injury has been lost to memory, and only the pattern of its transmission remains. When the empath sees this, when she sees that her mother was not a monster but a wounded woman who could not metabolize her own pain and so distributed it to her children, something profound shifts. The mother becomes a person rather than a force. The mother becomes mortal rather than mythic. The mother becomes, in the daughter's interior, a figure who can be grieved rather than fought, and the grief that follows this seeing is different from the grief that came before. The earlier grief was a child's grief, the grief of not having been loved enough. This grief is an adult's grief, the grief of seeing that the parent could not love you because the parent had not been loved either. It is a bigger grief. It encompasses more. It does not have a single villain at the center of it. It has a long line of people stretching back through history, each one carrying what they could not put down. This grief is the one that finally completes the leaving of the family system, not the angry grief that fueled the leaving in the first place, the deeper grief that sees the whole architecture and weeps for all of it. The mother, the father, the grandparents, the siblings who chose differently and are now living inside their own versions of the wound, the lovers who carried the pattern forward, the whole long inheritance. This grief is what Jung called, in the late work, the grief of individuation, the grief that comes not from being wounded but from seeing the wound clearly for the first time. The narcissist sibling in this seeing is no longer the enemy of childhood. He is the brother who chose armor when she chose absorption, and who is now, somewhere in his own life, paying the price of that choice. The marriage he could not sustain, the children who fear him, the friendships that did not survive his demands. He is not winning. He never was. He was running in the opposite direction from the same parent she was running toward. They are still, in the deepest sense, the two children at the table, but the table is empty now. The mother is gone. The roles are no longer enforceable. She has left. He, perhaps, has not. He may stay at the table for the rest of his life, eating around the absence, never naming it, never seeing it, never letting the wall come down enough to know what he has missed. She cannot save him. This is one of the hardest recognitions. She cannot reach across the table and pull him into the integration she has chosen. He will choose or he will not. The choice is his. Her love for him, if she still has love for him, must accept this. She can keep the door open, she cannot drag him through it. The empath who has integrated her own work is no longer in the business of dragging anyone through any door. The dragging was the old role. The new self offers presence, not extraction. She is present, available, lucid. She is no longer the one who carries other people across thresholds they have not chosen to cross. A woman I knew, many years after she had left her own marriage to a narcissistic man, dreamed the following dream. She was in a large house she did not recognize. The house had many rooms. She was walking through them slowly, examining each one. The rooms were empty but not abandoned. They had the feel of rooms waiting to be furnished. As she walked, she came to a room at the back of the house that had a single window. Through the window, she could see a garden. In the garden, 2 children were playing, a boy and a girl, perhaps 6 and 4 years old. She watched them for a long time. They were her brother and herself. As they were playing a game she remembered, a game with stones and small wooden sticks. They were laughing. They were not at the table. They were not in the kitchen. They were outside, in the garden, doing what children do when no one is watching them. She understood in the dream that she had been given the chance to see them as they had been before the family system had assigned them their roles. Before the splitting, before the empty plate, just 2 children in a garden, playing. The window was the boundary between her adult self and that earlier time. She did not try to open the window. She did not try to call to them. She simply watched and let them play, and felt, for the first time in her life, a kind of love for her brother that had no role inside it, no caretaking, no protection, no fear, just the love of one child for another. In a garden, before everything began, that dream is the integration of the sibling, not the reconciliation with the adult brother, the recovery of the original brother, the one who existed before the assignment, and in recovering him, she recovered also the original sister herself before the role. The 2 children in the garden are who they were before the family wound. Divided them. Seeing them is what allows the adult to leave the table without leaving her brother. He remains in her interior as the boy in the garden, the man he became, the man who chose armor and could not undo the choice is something separate. The boy is still loved. The man is grieved. The roles are over. What has been named here is what you have been living. The 2 children at the table, the empty plate, the mother who was not coming, the opposite strategies, the adult relationships that reenacted the original division, the slow recognition, the integration of the amputated half, the withdrawal of the projection, the seeing of the parent as a person, the grief of the whole inheritance, the new self that forms slowly in the room with the colder light. All of this has been the architecture you have been moving through, perhaps for years, perhaps for decades, perhaps without ever having the words for it. The words are not the architecture is what you were already living. The words are the recognition. The empath, when she has integrated, does not stop being sensitive. She does not stop feeling deeply. She does not stop noticing what others do not notice. The gift remains, but the gift is now hers to use or to set down as she chooses. It is no longer her assignment. It is no longer her identity. It is one of her capacities among many, and it serves the self that has finally formed, the self that was supposed to form in childhood and that the family system prevented from forming, and that has been forming slowly in the years since she began to see the narcissist sibling, if he ever does the work, will go through a parallel process. He will collapse, he will grieve, he will recover the capacity to feel that he amputated. He will see the parent, he will see his sister, he will perhaps come back to her, not as the man he was, but as someone different, someone capable of being met. This is rare. It happens when it happens. The two siblings can finally meet as adults, both whole, both integrated, both having reclaimed what was distributed across them in childhood. Most often it does not happen. Most often the narcissist stays in the armor until the end. This must be accepted. The empath's healing does not depend on his. The division between the two children of the same wound has ended. The roles assigned at that table will not resume.
This has been Carl Jung Original, a space where the patterns most people live through can finally be named. Voice and imagery, AI-assisted interpretation and framing, original work. Until next lecture.